The world of Dogman is packed with awesome facts. That's a fact. But do you know all the incredible details about this beloved series?
Arrest him!
Did you know Dogman wasn't always going to wear a police uniform? In fact, he wasn't even supposed to be half human. The early concepts for the character were totally different from the final version. Instead of a dog whose head was stitched onto a human body, he was originally just a normal pup who would gain superpowers whenever he got struck by lightning. Basically, a canine version of Shazam from DC Comics. Visually, he would have been just a dog with a cape. Good thing they changed their minds. His final look is way more unique. Crazy, right? And that's just the first of 20 amazing facts you didn't know about Dogman. So get ready, this is Cinewave. One of the weirdest things about Dogman is that OK City has a jail made only for cats. That's right, there are so many feline criminals in town that they needed a separate prison just to lock them all up. But actually, there are a bunch of other bizarre jails in the city. One for dogs, one for fish, one for old ladies, one for villains the size of insects, and even a jail just for mayors. All of these appear in the books and might show up in the upcoming DreamWorks sequel. It's crazy how OK City has that many criminals, enough to need a special prison for each type. But seriously, are there really that many elderly criminals out there? Many of the books in the series have titles that reference classic works of literature. For example, Lord of the Fleas is named after Lord of the Flies. Meanwhile, For Whom the Ball Rolls is a play on For Whom the Bell Tolls. And Grime and Punishment is a pun on Crime and Punishment, which you've probably heard of even if you've never read it. In the story, the explanation is that George and Harold, Dogman's fictional creators, are reading the classics in school, so they use them as inspiration for their new adventures. But it's also possible that Dave Pilkey, the real-life author, uses these references to spark kids' curiosity and encourage them to read the originals. Dogman is awesome, but classic literature is fun and important too. No one could have guessed this, but Sarah Hatoff, one of Dogman's most important characters, is actually a direct tribute to a close friend of the author. And guess what her name is? Sarah Hat On. Hat on, hat off. Whoever came up with that joke, Dave Pilkey, needs to be studied. What's funny is that almost no one picked up on this reference since very few people know about the real Sarah. But you can't deny Dave Pilkey's genius after learning the truth about the world's greatest reporter. Speaking of Sarah Hatoff, her birthday is on December 26th. And before you even ask, yes, that's also the birthday of the real Sarah, who is friends with the franchise's creator. In other words, Hatoff is basically a version of the real Sarah in the Dogman universe. Do you think the real Sarah is also a reporter? Even though it's less than 2 hours long, the DreamWorks movie managed to adapt multiple books at once. Of course, it didn't include everything that happens in each volume. That would only work in a TV series. But it pulled major events from several books to create a fresh story. The main books adapted were the first three, which showed Dogman's origin, his mini battles with Petey, the introduction of Little Petey, and the fight against Flippy. But there are also elements from later books, like the appearance of Petey's dad, who actually doesn't show up until book 7. In the movie, there are a few scenes that suggest the Chief has a crush on Sarah. Well, suggest might be putting it lightly. The Chief literally admits that he's secretly in love with her while arguing with her. And Sarah seems a little interested too, especially when she watches his epic entrance to take down Flippy. Is romance in the air? The funny thing is that in the books, these two never have a romantic relationship. In fact, the Chief actually has a crush on Nurse Lady and they later get married. But it looks like the movies are taking a different route and focusing on the romance between Chief and Sarah. So, who do you think Chief should end up with? Sarah or Nurse Lady? Let us know in the comments. Type hashtag Sarah or hashtag Nurse Lady. Since we've been talking so much about Sarah, let us ask you something. Did you know she's Australian? Even though Dogman takes place in the United States, some characters come from other countries, and Sarah is actually from Australia, just like the characters from the animated show Bluey, which you probably know if you have good taste. This becomes even more obvious when watching the DreamWorks movie because the actress who voices Sarah has an Australian accent. That's because she's Isla Fisher, an actress from Australia, who you might recognize if you've seen the Now You See Me movies. The franchise really knows how to hit us in the feels when it wants to, and that's exactly what happened in a heartbreaking movie scene where we find out that Chief's mother has passed away. She was never mentioned in the books, but the film decided to add this extra layer of depth to Chief's story.
Oh my God.
The world of Dogman is more alive than we could ever have imagined. Remember that buck-toothed girl who tries to adopt little Petey but gives up because he's too mischievous? She does this in both the movie and one of the books, and she actually pops up in several other volumes of the series. In Big Jim Begins, she even appears as a baby during a flashback. But the crazy part is that this character is one of the oldest in the franchise. She even appeared in the Captain Underpants books, which the author wrote and illustrated before creating Dogman. Now here's an extremely weird fact, which is totally expected in Dogman. Miss Nurse is such a skilled doctor that she even has a degree in frog psychology. Does that even exist? In the real world, no, but in OK City, anything is possible. Come on, you can't tell me you wouldn't love to be a frog psychologist if that were a real job. Dogman has a lot of enemies who didn't make it into the movie, like Dr. Scum, the Fair Fairy, and Piggy, who has a high chance of becoming the main villain in a future sequel. However, there's one villain who never appeared in the movie or the books. That might not make sense at first, but the reason is that this character was scrapped before ever making it into the story. He was supposed to be a penguin and a member of Fleas, a group of animal villains led by Piggy. Petey's favorite inventions are definitely his cars, and some of them are pretty wild and unique. In fact, his vehicles have some seriously interesting features. For example, one of them has a billiard ball as its gear shift and an air horn instead of a regular car horn. That actually makes a lot of sense if you think about it. Petey has to improvise and build his inventions with whatever he can find lying around. And honestly, that just makes his creations even more genius.
Maybe. Maybe not.
Another cool detail about Petey is that in the incredible scene where the cloning machine starts creating his clone, we actually see the world's most evil cat pull out one of his own whiskers and place it into the device so the genes could be used to create the clone. And for the rest of the movie, Petey stays without that whisker. Most other films wouldn't bother keeping track of such a tiny detail, but Dogman understands that these little things bring so much more life to the story, even if we don't consciously notice them at first. The same thing happens in the book where this takes place, A Tale of Two Kitties. And if you love our videos, why not subscribe to the channel? That way, you'll always get awesome content about your favorite animated movies. Come on, you know you can't resist this offer. Speaking of details and cats, have you ever noticed that Petey and his dad have 7 black stripes from their waists to their shoulders, while Lil Petey only has 4? That probably means that as the clone gets older, he'll develop more stripes. Since Petey's dad is quite old and has 7, that might be the maximum number of stripes a cat in this family can have. Even though the franchise is all about the dog-headed cop, some books in the series focus on exclusive characters. Mothering Heights, for example, dives deep into Petey's past. The latest book in the series, Big Jim Begins, takes it even further. It's entirely focused on Petey's former cellmate, Big Jim, and explores his origin story. Spoiler, the poor guy went through more than it seems. Dave Pilkey's books have a super recognizable art style, looking like they were drawn by a kid. That's not an insult, that's exactly what the author was going for. The movie did a great job adapting the essence of the drawings into 3D animation, but it's during the credits that longtime fans will feel most at home. That part is illustrated in 2D, just like the books. ADHD was originally designed to be a total destruction machine. He even had missile launchers. But in the books, Lil Petey makes some modifications to the robot to make him more eco-friendly. The result? ADHD lost his missile launchers and got solar panels instead, so he can always recharge himself in a sustainable way. Of course, Petey, who built the robot in the first place, absolutely hated the changes his son made. But let's be honest, being able to recharge with sunlight is extremely useful. Just imagine how much money was being spent on batteries for ADHD. We always talk a lot about Dave Pilkey, obviously since he created Dogman. But do you know who directed the movie about our canine cop? His name is Peter Hastings, and one of the reasons the movie turned out so great is definitely his influence on the project. And that was expected. Peter wasn't hired just because his name sounds like Petey's. He was chosen because he developed the epic tales of Captain Underpants, the animated series that continued the Captain Underpants movie, another book series by Dave Pilkey, which is actually part of the same universe as Dogman. Even though Dogman got a DreamWorks movie, it actually wasn't made by the company. Instead, it was developed by other studios partnered with DreamWorks. This is a strategy the company has started using in some of its more recent films, like Spirit Untamed and The Bad Guys 2. The video is coming to an end, but your fun doesn't have to. Just click on one of the 2 videos popping up on your screen. Thanks, and see you next time!